Welcome to part 9 in our video series, a series on advanced hormone testing. In this particular video, we're going to go through the monitoring of sublingual hormones, both with our Dutch, the dried urine test for comprehensive hormones, with that test and as well as with others. And these last two videos are really where we get into probably the two most difficult situations in terms of getting meaningful data and meaningful values in laboratory testing to actually adjust the dosages of hormones. It's really difficult with sublingual hormones. So as you look at the grading sheet here, we're probably being a little bit generous really to the urine testing. There is some valuable information to be taken from it, but when you just simply ask the question, can I take my value and really apply that to whether I've got too much hormone, not enough hormone, it's really, really difficult to do that well with sublingual hormones. And it's a different reason for each test. So let's go through those. But what we want to do is we want to avoid, as we affectionately refer to them, as the testing minions, or situations where the results you get don't really reflect what's going on in terms of the systemic level of hormone that you're getting from your hormone supplementation scenario, and we want to be very careful of those. And in this particular situation, this is a case where we have three different issues going on for three different types of tests, each of which make them difficult to use. So if you start with blood testing, serum, plasma, really the issue here is the speed of the hormone. So if we look at this study, they used increasing levels of testosterone, and yes, they got increasing blood levels of testosterone, but look how fast it's moving. By even 2 hours, there's really no difference between the three doses, and by 3 hours, you're easily back at baseline. So we've got to be really careful about giving somebody sublingual hormone and then monitoring, say, out here or here, and getting a low value and then interpreting that as a situation where there's more hormone needed, because in some situations that hormone is just gone. And so we want to be really careful about how we're interpreting those results. With saliva, it's really it's just not a viable option to monitor sublingual hormones using saliva testing. We just showed that the systemic increase in hormone is gone in a couple of hours. What's going to happen with sublingual hormones with saliva is you've got a contamination problem. The hormones are in milligrams in the supplements and picograms in the saliva. So if you want to kind of do the math on the difference between the two, there are 1 billion picograms in a milligram. So you're putting that much hormone in your mouth and then hoping that it doesn't get in the way of your testing, and it's just not practical. So as we go back to this sort of model we've been using where, we give this so-called just right dose of hormones, but what happens is those values are going to skyrocket, and by the time they return to baseline, the systemic increase of hormone is long gone. So the contamination of the mouth lasts far longer than any increased level that's systemic. So if you look at my personal levels, unfortunately, my testosterone starts off a little bit less than 100 at baseline. If I take a testosterone troche that's in the general range of what people typically take, on the lower end really, the saliva peaks at about, and these are real approximate values, but I've actually done this, peaks at about 100 million. So now I'm asking that contaminated 100 million to come all the way back down to where there's zero contamination, which, people have looked at and say it takes about 30 hours. But at that point, there's nothing left to see, right? The levels of hormones go up, they go down. The levels in saliva are going to go up so high that they're going to start creeping down, but by the time the contamination is gone, there's nothing left to see. So really the only thing you have to see is either residual contamination or it's a baseline value. There's no meaningful data to be had. The other thing to be careful of is as you're in these first couple hours and the results are in the millions, keep in mind saliva testing is typically done by immunoassay. If you put, for example, 1 million of a progesterone into a testosterone assay, it will increase the value falsely. So when you're looking at saliva testing, it's definitely a no-go for taking testosterone and measuring testosterone. But also keep in mind, if you're taking a sublingual hormone, you want to give that at least, I would say at least 12 hours to clear out before you measure other hormones. But for the hormone you're taking, it's really not an option. So for urine testing, whether it's our Dutch test or a 24-hour urine, the big issue here is first pass metabolism, and that's going to be a very significant challenge. So what happens is hormones get into circulation, and then urine gets its fair share of that. That's where part of the hormone ends up. That's a meaningful value. But what happens is it doesn't work if you swallow a significant fraction at all. So what happens is if you look at this patient, they're taking sublingual testosterone. Look at this value. What does that value represent? What it represents mostly is testosterone going into the gut, getting metabolized to testosterone, probably primarily glucuronide, and then that's going to go into the urine. But this testosterone that goes into systemic circulation, that's a fraction of this, and we really don't know how big of a fraction. We don't know because you don't know how much they swallowed. Those relationships they aren't that well defined, but even if they were, it's really a challenge to get rid of it. So the only way that I've found that it can work, and it's pretty challenging, is to put the sublingual hormone in, collect your saliva while you're administering the hormone so that you're not swallowing it, and then rinse your mouth when you're done. And that actually is somewhat effective, but that's pretty tricky to do. So can testing help in monitoring dosing for sublingual hormones? I think it's pretty challenging, and I don't think the testing is going to offer a lot of help. With urine testing, you can get some benefit from looking at the metabolites in terms of estrogen metabolites, as far as whether you're making bad metabolites, good metabolites, but that doesn't still address the issue of dosing very well. So it's just a really tricky situation. So I would not suggest putting a lot of weight in the lab testing when you're taking sublingual hormones. So I hope that's been helpful. It's a tricky situation. We always want a really good answer for every situation, but this is one, and you'll find in the next video as well with transdermal hormones, which is a really, really popular way to take hormones, but when you really look at the data, there just isn't a robust way to monitor doses. So we're going to look at that in that video. And if you have any questions on any of these topics, please feel free to reach out at info@precisionhormones.com.